You know, if we're honest with ourselves, there's a quiet paradox sitting at the center of modern life. We praise strength more than ever, celebrate resilience, admire the people who keep showing up no matter how heavy the load becomes. We tell them they're admirable. We tell them they're tough. We tell them they're built different. And yet, beneath that applause, something else is happening, something we rarely name out loud. Because sometimes the very act of being strong, day after day, without pause, without permission to bend, can slowly hollow a person out. I've watched it happen in rooms where no cameras were allowed, in conversations that never made the news, in the silence that follows the words, "I'm fine," when everyone knows that fine is doing far more work than it should. Most people overlook this truth, not because they're cruel, but because it's uncomfortable. It forces us to admit that what we call strength might actually be survival dressed up as virtue. We live in a time, especially in these years after 2008, accelerating into the mid 2020s, where the world rarely powers down. Screens glow late into the night. Jobs don't just ask for effort, they ask for identity. Families carry pressures that once belonged to entire villages. And somewhere along the way, pushing through stopped being a temporary necessity and became a moral expectation. If you were tired, you were weak. If you slowed down, you were falling behind. If you asked for help, you were failing some invisible test. So people adapted. They learned to swallow grief between meetings, to answer emails while their chest felt tight, to carry loss, anxiety, responsibility, and fear like invisible backpacks no one else could see. They became dependable, reliable, unbreakable, at least on the outside, and society rewarded that image because it kept everything moving. But the body has a way of telling the truth when language refuses to. Sleepless nights, shortened tempers, a heart that races even at rest, an exhaustion that no weekend can fix. Elevated stress hormones, quietly reshaping health, narrowing joy, dimming the part of us that imagines a future instead of just enduring the present. What makes this so dangerous is not pain itself. Pain is part of being human. What breaks us is the belief that we must face it alone, silently, indefinitely. That to be strong is to never crack, never pause, never admit that the weight is getting heavy. I've met leaders who could command rooms, shape policy, move markets, and still sit across from me utterly depleted, wondering why the fire they once carried had burned so low. I've met parents holding families together with sheer willpower, quietly unraveling in the car before walking back inside with a smile. I've met young people who already feel old, worn down by a culture that confuses constant output with worth. And here's the sobering part. This isn't just personal, it's moral. A society that glorifies endless toughness without offering care begins to erode its own foundation. When people are too drained to rest, they're too drained to dream, too drained to disagree thoughtfully, too drained to participate fully in the work of citizenship. Democracy doesn't just depend on laws and institutions, it depends on human beings who still have enough emotional oxygen to engage. When exhaustion becomes normalized, empathy thins. When burnout spreads, trust fractures. When entire communities carry unseen strain, decision making narrows, patience shortens, and division finds fertile ground. We start mistaking numbness for neutrality, disengagement for peace. And so the question isn't whether strength matters, it does. The question is what kind of strength we're asking people to carry and at what cost. Are we building a culture that honors human limits or one that quietly breaks people and calls it character? If strength as we define it today is leaving so many people empty, anxious, and alone, then we have to ask ourselves, what exactly are we protecting? And who are we losing along the way? If this reflection is landing somewhere personal for you, I invite you to pause with it, share your thoughts in the comments, let others know they're not alone, and subscribe if you want to keep exploring these quieter truths together. When I think about how we arrived here, I don't see a single villain. I see momentum. I see a world that sped up quietly at first, then all at once. Somewhere after 2008, the ground shifted. Technology promised efficiency, flexibility, freedom, and in many ways, it delivered. But it also erased the natural pauses that once gave our minds and bodies room to breathe. Work followed us home, news followed us to bed, comparison followed us everywhere. We began measuring our worth by responsiveness, by availability, by how much we could endure without complaint. Strength stopped being a tool and became an identity. And once strength becomes identity, rest feels like betrayal. I saw this long before the Oval Office. When I was organizing in Chicago, people didn't come to meetings because they were lazy or disengaged. They came tired, bone tired, working two jobs, carrying sick parents, holding families together with faith and duct tape. They believe deeply in change, but belief doesn't cancel exhaustion. And too often, the bravest people were the ones least likely to admit they were nearing the edge. Back then, I learned something that stuck with me. Resilience without relief is just slow erosion. You don't notice it day to day. You notice it years later, when trust is thinner, patience shorter, hope harder to summon. As the years went on, that same pattern scaled upward. In leadership, in institutions, in government, in the White House, you learn quickly that projecting certainty is easy. Admitting strain is harder. There's always another crisis, another briefing, another reason to delay rest until after this passes. But the truth is, it never fully passes. There's always another moment demanding strength. I remember nights sitting alone long after the halls had emptied, feeling the weight of decisions that would touch lives I'd never meet. You carry it because that's the job. But if you don't name the weight, if you don't share it, it starts to live inside you, quietly, patiently, waiting. That's what no one tells you about being strong. It doesn't break you loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It wears you down in increments so small you mistake them for normal, until one day you realize you're functioning, not feeling, enduring, not imagining, surviving, not living. And this isn't just about individuals, it's about systems that demand grit while withholding care. We praise people for pushing through long hours while wages stagnate. We applaud sacrifice while making rest a privilege. We tell folks to be resilient in environments designed to drain them. Then we act surprised when anxiety spikes, when addiction spreads, when isolation deepens. Science eventually gave language to what people already felt. Chronic stress reshaping the body, sleep eroding, blood pressure rising, joy narrowing. But even with the data in front of us, the old reflex remained. Toughen up, keep going, don't slow the machine. Yet something began to change. Not all at once, quietly. Workplaces experimenting with mental health days, schools teaching children how to name emotions instead of burying them, communities, especially among men, creating spaces where pressure could be spoken without shame. These weren't dramatic revolutions. They were small acts of honesty. And honesty, I've learned, is where real change begins. Because courage here doesn't look like endurance alone. It looks like an executive admitting they're close to collapse and stepping back before damage is done. It looks like a parent saying, I can't do this alone and asking for help. It looks like leaders modeling vulnerability, not as spectacle, but as signal, permission for others to breathe. That kind of strength unsettles old norms. It threatens cultures built on silence, but it also builds trust. When someone in power says, I've been there too, walls come down, masks loosen, people stop pretending and start connecting. And connection is not a luxury, it's infrastructure. Communities don't hold together through toughness alone. They hold together through empathy, through the shared understanding that being human comes with limits. That saying, I am not okay, will be met with support, not dismissal. This matters deeply for democracy. A nation of exhausted people does not deliberate well. It reacts, it retreats, it fractures. When citizens are running on empty, they disengage or lash out. But when people are rested enough to reflect, to listen, to disagree without dehumanizing, they strengthen the civic fabric. The injustice, of course, is that exhaustion is not evenly distributed. Low wage workers, caregivers, marginalized families, they carry compounded strain, fewer buffers, longer waits for help. And when we normalize burnout, we lock inequality into the next generation. Children inherit not just circumstance, but stress. But when we normalize healing, we level the field. We give everyone a fairer chance to show up whole. Now, in these mid 2020s, the choice is sharper. Technology floods us with highlight reels that mock real struggle. Culture worships grind while making rest feel indulgent. Mental health needs grow while access lags. Each day presents small decisions: scroll past pain or sit with it, push until breaking or redefine success as sustainable. These choices accumulate. They shape not just our lives, but the emotional resilience of those who come after us. I don't believe healing is surrender. I believe it's discipline. It's the steady work of telling the truth about what we carry, of building systems that value people more than output, of choosing compassion even when toughness gets louder applause. Progress here won't be perfect. It will be incremental. One boundary set, one conversation opened, one leader brave enough to rest publicly. But that's how meaningful change has always happened, not through spectacle, but through persistence. So I'll leave you with this. What would change if we stopped equating strength with silence? What kind of nation might we build if rest were seen not as weakness, but as wisdom? And what becomes possible when we finally allow ourselves and each other to be fully, honestly human? If these questions stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments, listen to others, and subscribe if you want to keep exploring these deeper reflections together.